What's going on, nerds? Today, we're going to be trying something different. This is going to be the beginning of a, hopefully, weekly series where instead of taking a deck and playing some games with it and then just doing like a 1-minute breakdown in the beginning of the video, we're going to be covering a deck from A to Z, head to toe. Decks don't have toes, but you know what I mean. Breaking down card choices, each card individually, replacements for those, snapping, retreating, strengths, weaknesses, and everything in between. And then at the end of the video, we're going to be playing an example game, and then I'll narrate over some of the plays, so hopefully help you guys get a better understanding of the decks we present on here. Today's deck, Tribunal Combo. So the primary win condition of this deck is usually some sort of early play like Zabu Ravona into a Magic, into an Iron Man, into an Onslaught, into a Living Tribunal. This, if done perfectly, which it usually doesn't because nothing ever works perfectly, but this deck can pump out like hundreds of points in all three lanes if you stack Onslaught on top of your Iron Man and Mystique. The second way this deck can win, and I actually find this to be more frequent than the primary, but it's the less powerful way, is playing Miss Marvel in the middle, copying with Mystique, and then playing Onslaught into that middle lane. And then that usually gives you 30-something power on the left and right lane, and it doesn't really matter if you don't win the middle lane, but you still put out a decent amount of power in the middle. And then the third way this deck wins, which happens a lot more than you think it would, is just playing your stuff out. Usually it comes off the back of a Jubilee and Iron Lad copying something or pulling something really good like an Iron Man or an Onslaught or a Sarah, and maybe playing an Iron Man early with Ravona on the board, copying it with Mystique. Just playing your stuff out, basically. It just so happens that all this stuff, when stacked on top of each other, even if you don't do the really ridiculous playline, can pull out games. All right, on to the card choices. So we'll cover the ramp first, and by ramp I mean Zabu, Ravona, Magic, Sarah, Wave. Stuff that either reduce the costs of your things or lets you get them out before the end of the game. Magic, basically. Wave, I guess, as well. Zabu and Ravona are kind of self-explanatory. They let you get your Jubilee, your Iron Lad, your Miss Marvels down on turn 3, which is really important when you're trying to play an Onslaught and Iron Man and Living Tribunal in the same game. Magic actually kind of ends up being the most important of these because unless you have like an Onslaught on top of a Sarah, it is sometimes hard to get everything out onto the field that you need to, so Magic comes in really clutch with that. Wave is great because you can wave on turn 3, and then whatever you have in your hand, if it's Sarah, Onslaught, or Tribunal, those are all great to get out with Wave. Sometimes you go Wave into Onslaught on turn 4, and then on turn 5 you put a Sarah into the Onslaught lane, and you can go really crazy when you do that. So moving on from the ramp cards, the stuff that lets you get out cards earlier, we're moving on to the power. And the power here, kind of obvious, it's Onslaught, Miss Marvel, Iron Man, Tribunal, and Mystique. These are the cards that they just give you your power. The whole deck works around them. None of these are replaceable, and they're all pretty crucial to how the deck functions. Now, these last two cards are probably the most flexible ones. Well, they are the flexible ones, but it's Iron Lad and Jubilee. Iron Lad is really great here because when Iron Lad copies an ongoing effect, it's just way better than the ongoing effect usually would be on its own because Iron Lad has that 6 base power. Jubilee basically does the same thing as Iron Lad does, except it's a 1 power card that we can get out early thanks to Ravona, but honestly, they both kind of serve the same purpose, Lad and Jubilee. Since we're talking about card choices, let's go on to some replacements or possible substitutions for the deck, depending on the metagame. Now, these are the replaceable cards in my opinion. I guess you can make an argument for Sarah too, but I wouldn't ever cut Sarah personally. But yeah, Jubilee could be Super Scroll if you are in a ongoing metagame. If you're pocket meta, whatever your rank you're at, there's a lot of ongoing effects going around, then Super Scroll is just fine for Jubilee. And then the only other replaceable card is Wave. Wave is solid to ramp out a Sarah, Onslaught, or Tribunal early in the game, but past a turn 3 Wave, sometimes it's not very useful. So if you're afraid of Rogue or Enchantress, or you go up against a lot of tech decks like Sarah Control on the ranks that you're at, then Cosmo is actually really good instead of Wave to protect everything. As far as the other cards go, not replaceable at all. It's just how the combo works, how the deck functions, how it puts out its power. Any of the Miss Marvel, Iron Man, Onslaught, Tribunal, Mystique, none of that stuff is replaceable at all. All right, on to snapping strategy with this deck. How and when you should snap. The first scenario is if you have Ramp, Sarah, and Jubilee or Iron Lad. Now I mean in your hand, or if you draw into your Jubilee or Iron Lad with one of the aforementioned cards already out on the field. With Zabu or Ravonna on the field early and a Jubilee or Iron Lad in your hand, the wheels are spinning already. Your deck's doing what it wants to do, so you can be pretty comfortable snapping in that situation. The next scenario I would snap with is Wave into a Sarah or a Onslaught. If you have all three, then for sure snap. Because when you wave on turn 3 into an Onslaught on turn 4, on turn 5 you play Sarah down, it's going to reduce the cost of everything by 2, which should let you play out most of your power. And the last scenario you can snap in with is if you have Magic on turn 3 and all the big stuff you need with your combo to work. Now all this comes with a caveat, because if you're playing against a deck you suspect runs Enchantress, then you probably don't want to snap at all. Because the only thing that can happen when you're playing against, say, like, let's say a Sarah control deck, if you have one of these great hands and you snap, the opponent's either going to leave or they're going to snap back. It's never a good end result when you're playing against somebody that you think they might have Enchantress. Just don't snap against them. You either win 1 cube or you're going to lose 8. This is not a good look. It's not good. All right, on to the strengths and weaknesses of this deck, what this deck is good at beating and what it's weak at beating. First up, you have mid-range decks that just don't usually run tech. An example of this would be like Thanos decks, Lockjaw Thanos decks, Surfer decks, and Loki. They usually don't run Enchantress or even Rogue half the time. So against those decks, they simply can't get bigger than you, and they don't have the tools to stop you. So you can just feel free snapping early if you think you have an advantage, and those matchups, you're usually going to win if things work out right. The other scenario where this deck is good is against other combo decks, meaning Hela, Shuri. I know Shuri isn't really a combo deck, but it sort of is. They just do 2 giant things, and Mr. Negative. None of those decks run Rogue or Enchantress, and all they're trying to do is a simple combo, and this deck in particular, it just has the possibility to get bigger than any other combo deck in the game. So if you're going up against a Hela deck and you have a decent hand, snap away, go for it. Same with Mr. Negative too. I think this deck is one of the only decks in the game that if Mr. Negative like fully goes crazy and does everything they want to do, you could still beat them, which is kind of wild. And this next part is, we already sort of covered it, what this deck is weak against. Any deck that runs Enchantress, i.e. Sarah Control, or some sort of mid-range deck that usually runs Rogue. Now, aside from Enchantress and Rogue, the obvious things, this deck is actually weak against Annihilus decks, or just clutter junk decks in general, because if they send over 2 or 3 things to your side of the board, you really need that space to operate. The only way you can win those games if you just stack like 4 cards in the middle lane, like Iron Man, Onslaught, Mystique, Tribunal. That's the only way you're winning those games. Otherwise, whenever they send something over to your side of the board, it's way worse than it would be for other decks, because 1, it might shut down your Ms. Marvel, and 2, you sort of need all the space you can get. All right, let's move on to an example game real quick. All right, we are jumping into the game here, and we play Ravonna on the right lane simply because we don't want to clog the middle. And we play Ravonna instead of Zabu because we don't have a 4-drop, but we do have Iron Man. We go Wave on the right, basically for the same reason as Ravonna. Opponent's playing some Deadpool Destroy. And Wave gives us a little splashy splash. Now we go for the Living Tribunal in the middle here, because that's usually where you want to stack your ongoings, and we don't play Iron Man because it already has a discount. Stuff goes pew pew on the opponent's side. Sweet animation. Tribunal's specifically good here because of deep space as well. Now this turn I play Zabu on the left because we just want some sort of points down there, and in case we pull a Ms. Marvel with Jubilee, it's nice to already have a card over there. We play Jubilee in the middle specifically because we want Onslaught in the middle if she pulls that, and we don't play it on the right because if she pulls something over there, it'll clog the lane. Yeah, now we have Onslaught in the middle, and a discounted Iron Man and Mystique, which sets up a pretty sick last turn. We just go Iron Man into Mystique thanks to the Ravonna discount, and we should expect to see a concede from our opponent, because that is going to be a lot of power. And there it is. GG. That's the video. I hope this helped. If this does well, I'll keep doing more in the future. But for now, that's it. Like, subscribe, do all those things. Check out some, I guess it's merch. It's not really merch. It's just cool design clothes that I made in the description below. Members of the channel get 10% off. But for now, that's it. Later on, nerds. And Wave gives us a little splashy splash.